Davian, it has been a minute.
It has been.
How are things? There's a lot of sports stuff for us to dive into on this fine 1st of November. It is officially time for Christmas, Davian. Let's get all the
No,
Christmas music going.
no,
Get it
no.
blasting. It's time. Davian, before we
I'm
get into the
sorry.
Christmas talk,
I need
how
till
are you?
Thanksgiving till Mariah Carey starts playing, all right? Give me till Thanksgiving, all right? And then I'll listen to her throughout in the entire month of December, all right? Look, sports has been wild. I mean, we really counted out those Diamondbacks. We really did. But hey, Texas Rangers looks like they're on a roll. I mean, I think they're playing right now as we speak.
So currently, right now, as we speak, I have the game on in the background. So if you see any reactions, that's definitely because I'm watching that game right now.
See.
Currently, it's 0-0 at the bottom of the 6th. Diamondbacks are up. Diamondbacks have yet to allow a hit. They have a no-hitter. They'll have a no-hitter entering the 7th inning, which is incredibly impressive, which also must mean that they're going to lose this game, too, on top of it.
Yes.
But currently, Texas is up 3-1. Davian, I don't know how much of the World Series you've watched. I think we were all just shown to be frauds for that MLB postseason prediction video, because the Rangers, we all talked about their pitching, and although Scherzer's out now and he was ruled out and taken off the World Series roster a couple days ago because he got injured, he was back, he was healthy, he was playing well. The pitching was really good. Eovaldi is pitching right now, former World Series champion with the Boston Red Sox, I believe, was definitely on the Red Sox, 100%. Yeah. Pitching's been great for the Rangers. That's been one of their strong things. Montgomery from the Cardinals as well, another great guy in their pitching arsenal. And for the Diamondbacks on the other hand too, we all kind of counted them out. I said anyone in the NL had a fair chance except for the Marlins. So I'll pat myself on the back for that very vague take. Next up, I'm going to say one of the 32 teams in the NFL this year is going to win the Super Bowl.
Wow.
Maybe 31 because it won't be the Patriots. But we'll get into the Patriots at some point on this podcast or in a future podcast. But the Diamondbacks have been so good, and you would think right now that they wouldn't be as aggressive with their base stealing, but even in the World Series, they've been so aggressive with their base stealing. Yeah. And although they lost 11-7 last night, it should not be forgotten that the Rangers were up 10-0 at one point in that game. So I'm definitely intrigued to see if the Diamondbacks can pull something off and come back in the series, because everyone has ran them off this entire MLB postseason, and they've really been proving people wrong.
Yeah, they really have. They were written off, but they didn't write back, quoting our boy Geno Smith. I think
the podcast Geno Smith.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I think that's been interesting. College football has been, entertaining to an extent. NFL has been kind of weird year. I'll be honest. I would go back to my predictions in the beginning of the year, and I'm like, what happened? Like, where did I go wrong? I went wrong in many ways. We'll talk about that. We had a blockbuster trade in the NBA. We had blockbuster moves in the NFL today with the Raiders. All of this is happening on California time, so I'm waking up and seeing all of this at I'm waking up at 8 a.m. and seeing at 3 a.m. Josh McDaniels was fired. I'm like, huh? And at 4 a.m., the night before, it was James Harden traded. I'm like, why are they up so late? Don't they have a bedtime? Don't they need some sleep? No? Was it just me, Raffi? Am I wrong about that?
Mark Davis just calling up Josh McDaniels at 3 a.m. He's just like, hey, Josh, you know what? I just don't think it's going to work out. You're going to be fired. Can this wait till the morning? Nope, sorry.
Yeah,
if I sleep on it too long, then I might change my mind. I kind of got to make
the guy get some sleep.
So. I mean, my hair just doesn't look amazing every day. I need to get my 3 hours of sleep, which is why Mark Davis looks absolutely flawless. But let's get into this James Harden trade. I want to hear some of your thoughts. First, I want to just mention, I think the most overlooked, yes, overlooked is the proper terminology. Overlooked part of this trade is something that you wouldn't imagine. It's not a player that I'm looking at right now. It's a 2028 unprotected first-round pick. Now, you might be asking, Raffi, that is in 5 years. That person who's going to get drafted is 14, 13 years old right now. They're not even in high school at this moment, which is crazy to think about. Still taller than Davian in all likelihood. There was a dig. Sorry, Davian. Anywho, the Clippers, when you look at their team, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, both 32, 34 respectively. James Harden also 32. He's getting up there in age. there's a good chance that all 3 of those guys are not gonna be on the Clippers by 2028, and there's a good chance that that pick could be a very high pick. So I think that's a piece of this trade that's being overlooked right now, but I think in a couple of years, it's definitely gonna show up to be a
Look,
big piece.
Look, here's what I'll say. First off, there were rumors about James Harden to the Knicks. We clearly saw that was never going to happen. I knew it was not going to happen, and I was proved to be right. Look, what I'll say is this. I think this is a fair trade in terms of I think that what the 76ers were able to get for James Harden, I did not think they would be able to get that much. Getting Covington, getting Batum, getting Morris, getting KG Martin, getting the picks from the Thunder, from the Clippers, whatnot, and I seriously think that they continue to remain a contender team, and I think if down the line, if we were to put in the hypothetical, knock on wood, it doesn't happen, that Harden gets injured, hopefully it doesn't happen, we've seen Harden get injured in the past, right? The amount of depth that you currently have on the team will play such an important role, especially down the line in the season when players get more injured, especially with the new rules now in the NBA with how often you can rest a player, who you can rest. Like Embiid won't be able to get like rest time per se, but we know that this rule only goes against the Lakers because they're the Lakers. I like how OKC is like always there. Like they're always got to get involved with this pick trade, pick swap. It's just like I don't really understand why they're involved. I think that the Clippers themselves took a bet and they wanted to pay off. They're in it to win it this year. I feel like it reminds me a lot of the Raptors when they brought in Kawhi Leonard. This is what the trade reminds me of. I know that I'm looking at CBS right now. They gave Clippers a C minus. I'm gonna give them a B plus, maybe even. They're in it to win it, and if they win it, it paid off. The bet paid off.
Yeah, any trade at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You could trade. Heck, if you were the Bucks and you traded Giannis for a second round pick, and you went on to win the NBA championship, that's it might not be a great trade for your future, and definitely not a great trade for a small market like Milwaukee to trade their biggest asset in terms of just selling to the general public. If you win a championship, then you automatically are a winner in the trade, 100%. I really like what you said about the Sixers picking up a ton of depth as well. I thought that was a really big key part of the trade because you look at the Clippers too. James Harden is half in, half out. You can kind of call him diva. That's definitely a term that could be used to describe him. When he's interested in playing well, he's a good player. But when he's just not feeling it, or sometimes he just doesn't show any I'm here, I am James Harden. Sometimes he just acts like
he doesn't show himself off.
He doesn't care. And the moment he loses interest, that's when his team starts to suffer. We know Kawhi Leonard's injury history. We know Paul George's injury history. You traded a bunch of your depth. I'm looking. I still have a bad taste in my mouth from Brooklyn's big three experiment that went wrong. I think we're seeing a time when big threes are going to start to wear off more and more. And I think this was a last ditch effort for the Clippers to put some stuff together. And I just don't think it's going to work out for them. I know there was one quote, and I'm going to definitely butcher this, but for some NBA fan bases, when they have James Harden at some point, there are two great days: the day that you acquire James Harden and the day you trade away James Harden. That's just how polarizing of a player he can be. You love him when he starts playing for your team, but by the end, you are sick and tired of him. That's something definitely to keep tabs on and see how the Clippers do going forward. Moving on, my favorite time of year, along with almost every time of year, because honestly, at this point, I gotta be honest, I love all the times of year. NHL playoff hockey always takes number one, takes the cake, but I do love college football playoff ranking season
it's
as well.
It's the sports equinox.
It's amazing.
All five sports: college football, hockey, baseball, basketball, all on at the same time. It's amazing.
Exactly. And Monday was, I believe, the 29th time that we have had an NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL game all on the same day. Some people are saying 29, that's too much, but still, it's like for all four sports leagues being around since at least like the 50s, 40s, further on than that, that's pretty impressive. And I think that's a stat that's really fun. And I at least enjoy that kind of ESPN stat. I know we all see some very well those ESPN stats, which are very ridiculous. Like LeBron James has shaved 4 times in the last 5 days. What's
That's a
going
lot.
on
That's
there? This is an
hard.
NBA historical record that's been broken since Bill Russell did it back in 72 during, like, who knows? Like, just some random, like, nonsense. But let's get into the college football playoff, which, honestly, I don't think is filled with too much nonsense. Speaking of nonsense, Ohio State, who a lot of people are upset about being number 1, I really like this. I expected the college football playoff to just keep it going, say Georgia 1, Michigan 2. But you know what? They had the guts to put Ohio State at 1, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be 1. They beat Penn State. That's a great win. And then they also beat Notre Dame too. And as much as we both hate Notre Dame, especially me, that's a good win to have. So Ohio State being 1,
amazing
they
win.
have the best resume in college football, and they deserve to be number 1.
I agree with that. I think, like, even with the loss to Michigan, when that happens, I still think they're a college football playoff team. I think that they proved enough to be in the playoffs. I think beating Notre Dame, beating Penn State, I think that alone is enough already to kind of prove, and having a 7-1 record, if that's what ends up happening, which I think will happen. I think that they're a surefire like top 4 at least. I don't like Florida State in the top 4. I do want to comment on that. Look, I think that the team's been, yes, the team's undefeated. Yes, they've played well, but I just don't think that they are. I just feel like their wins have been so close. I feel like, yes, a win is a win, but I don't think they look college football ready for me. I understand their record says a lot, but there's other teams that, are 7-0 and they're not, or 8-0 even at this point now. And there's a reason why they're not top 4, because they haven't played against good enough competition. I feel like that FSU, yes, has played against good competition, but as weeks go on, we start realizing that the competition that they played were actually not that good. So they might have been ranked at the time that they played them, but nowadays they're not ranked. So you can't continue to hold them and say, like, oh, they beat 3 ranked teams, but those teams aren't ranked. They're not ranked. Simple as that. FSU is not a top 4 team. I'm going to put Washington. I think Washington should be in the top 4, or even Oregon. But because Washington did beat Oregon, I think Washington needs to be in the college football playoffs. And if they're not, I think it's just a disgrace to college football playoff rankings. And which, we know how terrible this system could be at times, which is great. Why next year we'll be having 12-team format.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head pretty well with Florida State, and just talking about how they've won a lot of tight games. They play Florida and Miami in their final 4 games, and then obviously the ACC championship. So if they lose to one of those teams, which I think are good teams, there's definitely a good. I'd say a 1-loss Florida State definitely does not beat if Texas, Bama, if they're 1-loss teams, I'm taking them over Florida State absolutely. Also, as you mentioned with Florida State, Duke no longer ranked. They were ranked when they played them a week or 2 ago. And then you bring up the LSU game, obviously, earlier on in the season, which set the tone for Florida State this year. LSU is ranked 14, 6-2. If they were 1-loss, they go to Tuscaloosa or play in Death Valley, one of the two, wherever they play, doesn't matter. Yeah. If LSU was a 1-loss team that beat Alabama, then that definitely would help Florida State's case even more. But right now, with LSU just being a 6-2 team, sure, if they beat Bama, that's helpful, but they're still a 2-loss team. I do want to talk a little bit about Washington, too, because Washington at 5, I was a little surprised by that. Because personally, when I look at Georgia and Michigan, and Davian, I know you're big on Michigan, and I know that I had Michigan. I might have even had Michigan win the national championship. I'd have to go back a couple podcasts to see. Washington has a great win versus Oregon. It was a close game, but they wound up pulling away at the end. It was at home, but still, a win is a win. It was a great win. And looking at Michigan, Georgia, Florida State, Washington has the best win out of all those teams. So I personally think that Washington at this moment should be ranked 2, in all honesty. Texas, another team, along with Oklahoma, one of those 2 teams they're likely on a crash course again to play each other in the Big 12 championship. And you'd have to imagine that the winner of that also could potentially get a spot, provided they're a 1-loss team. And then another thing to keep an eye on too, and once again, we still have so much time, which is great, but it's difficult right now to really say who's better than who, since we have so much time left in the college football season.
Agreed, yeah.
But Bama versus Georgia, if Georgia stays undefeated, which will be tough too, because they play a 1-loss Mizzou, and they play at home, but that's a tough game. Then they play number 10 Ole Miss at home, still a tough game. And then they play at Tennessee. I don't think that's going to be too big of a challenge for them, but Ole Miss and Ole Miss is going to be certainly, and Mizzou, I think, are two teams that can definitely upset Georgia. But that Georgia-Alabama SEC championship game, if it winds up with that format, that's going to be a massive game. I think we're going to have a great conference weekend just because we have the Big 12 expanding, OU and Texas are leaving, then you have the Pac-12 dissolving. I think that championship weekend this year, with the 14 playoff being the last year, I think it's going to be amazing. I'm really excited for it right now.
I am as well. There's a lot of teams that are good. A lot of teams that I think, like, even in the Big Ten, that I think have been, like, doing pretty darn well, like Rutgers, Maryland. I think those teams have been doing pretty well. Oh, Maryland, not so much lately, but I think this SEC is a very, very interesting conference where I could see a 2-loss team could make the playoffs in LSU, in Bama, if they are to win out, beat Georgia, or, you know, in the SEC championship. I think the winner of the SEC championship is going to the playoffs. I think it's that simple. Unless somehow Georgia falls off in these next few weeks, and then a SEC championship game, Georgia-Bama, is all of a sudden not as important or vital as a game. I actually want to know your thoughts, Raffi. So let's say Georgia loses to Mizzou, loses to any of these teams, right? And Bama beats Georgia, or Bama wins out. Does Bama have a chance of making the playoffs? Or being a 2-loss team with an SEC that's basically cannibalizes themselves, do they not have a shot?
I think Alabama has. I think simple put, Alabama's only loss right now is Texas.
Yes.
Texas, I don't see falling for any further. I really don't expect them to lose another game this season. Obviously, we all saw me put up the horns up sign earlier on in the season. I have high expectations for Texas. Texas is a good team this year, and Alabama lost to a good Texas team in a pretty close game, I'd say. I mean, Alabama clawed back a little bit at the end, but I think Texas just really showed up to that game. A 1-loss Alabama as an SEC champion puts them in the college football playoff 100%.
Yeah.
Alabama, if they were to fall at any point, the loss would have to come at LSU, and then they would really need help because Kentucky, Chattanooga, Auburn, those are all games that I expect Alabama to win. LSU is at home. If Alabama loses another game at home versus LSU, I really do think that it's not going to be enough. We haven't seen a 2-loss team make it to the college football playoff yet. I really don't anticipate this final year being the one year we see that. Because if you look at it too, Ohio State and Michigan, if both of those teams wind up, one is undefeated and the other is a 1-loss, and the 1 loss is to their opposing team, then I think both of them get in. Florida State, I think, has a good chance at going undefeated, although we both have been harping on how we don't think Florida State is as good as their ranking is. Washington is a team where Washington or Oregon, they both have absolute gauntlets to finish the season. So if both of them are on a crash course to play each other in the Pac-12 championship, and let's say Washington's undefeated going into the Pac-12 championship, Oregon is a 1-loss also going to Pac-12. If Oregon wins that, Oregon gets in, and then you're still looking at Washington, whose 1 loss is to Oregon, who they beat earlier in the season. So it would take a lot of cannibalism within the college football realm for any 2-loss team to make the college football playoff, in my opinion. So Bama has a 1-loss. If they win the SEC championship, I put them in. If they lose the SEC championship or go to 2 losses at any point, I think it's over for them. I do also want to end off by just saying Notre Dame, they're not making the playoff. They lost 2 games. Thank you, because we don't need to hear this nonsense for the rest of the college football season. So if anything, this is a good season for me.
I will say this, though, all right? You say 2-loss team can't make it to the playoffs. Just saying, Rutgers plays Ohio State, right? Then they play Michigan. Just saying, if you beat both of them, right? Hypothetically speaking, your only loss is to Penn State, right? And if you win the Big Ten championship, hypothetically speaking, Rutgers is not only going bowling, they're going to the college football playoffs.
I'm sorry, I can't respect any team that only beat Michigan State at home, nonetheless, by 3 points. They are 0-5 in conference play, and they're 2-6 overall. I can't respect any team that loses a tight game versus the 2023
Respectfully, though,
Michigan
watch
State Farm.
these next 2 weeks. Rutgers is going to go nutty. Okay, either way, but let's highlight some important games, I think, really coming up this upcoming weekend. We got Kansas State at Texas. Or is that Texas? Yep, Kansas State at Texas.
That is, I'm sorry, I'm going to run over you real quick. That is an underrated game because Kansas State has had Texas' number the past couple years.
Yep.
I'm very excited about this game because there's a very good chance that Texas might get upset. I know it's in Austin, but Kansas State, watch out for them. They always strike when you least expect them to.
I agree with that. I think with the Clemson-Notre Dame game, yes, I know Clemson hasn't been played well, but the head coach is on a hot seat now, right? So you never know what might happen.
Calling people out.
Yeah. You got Army Air Force, which is might not be a bad game. I mean, I think the game of the week, I think, is one of the game of the weeks is going to be Mizzou against Georgia, and then
I'm honestly shocked. I'm sorry to keep running you over.
Nah, you good, bro.
Georgia right now is minus 15.5. Now, we will never be advertising betting because you do whatever you want with your money. I don't want to have a say in what you do with your money. You can do whatever you want. Minus 15.5, though. That's interesting. I get it's at Georgia, but Mizzou has been good this year.
They're a good
really
team,
good football team. I'm honestly a little surprised that it's over 2 touchdowns, over 2 scores in that game. So that's definitely something interesting to look out for. But continue on, Davian.
Yeah, and then finally we do have Washington at USC. USC team which has been struggling, but a win over Washington would be huge for them. And it is at home, but it'd be great, for them. And of course, game day. We know Theodore will definitely be down there. Theodore's currently at a conference in where's he? Atlanta? Yeah, Atlanta. Meeting with some sports media, so he'll report to us back next week what he experiences. But I'm more interested in hearing how college game day is. LSU at Alabama. You know what? Let's make our picks, Raffi. Who do you got winning LSU Alabama game?
A great game. That's going to be great. I love it on CBS too because I love their intro every single time. I'm going to go Alabama here. I think we're seeing they're winning close games again, and this is just reminding me of classic Alabama. Like they squeaked by Texas A&M, they squeaked by Arkansas. Obviously, they had their struggle with USF earlier on in the year, but we'll ignore that. I think they're progressing in the right direction, and it's a Nick Saban team. I think Alabama is going to say not so fast, as Lee Corso would do here. Not so fast, and they're gonna do. I think they're gonna beat LSU. I'm very excited about this game. We are so blessed with a lovely college football slate, and I have no exams next week, so I'm very excited. I do want to, before we get to your prediction, I'm very disappointed in you. The Battle of Bedlam is also this weekend, and it might be the very last time between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. I'm a bit disappointed in you for glossing over that. It's okay. I'm sure you missed it. It's no big deal. But I did want to mention that game as well because that game is also going to be really fun. But, Davian, your pick on LSU Bama. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say.
Roll Tide! All right? It's Bama's time. We're going to the college football playoffs, all right? This is our time. This is our time. The reason why I'm saying our is because Cornell football is not going to college football playoffs. We're not even in the college football playoffs, like even conversation.
David, you guys can still go to the college football playoff. Of course, just buy tickets. Do what the Dallas Cowboys do every year.
Yeah, no. I do have to say though, Cornell goes against UPenn this week. I got Cornell winning. That's my team right there. But I'm gonna make a shocking pick right here, Raffi. I mentioned this before as a hypothetical. I think it becomes a reality. Rutgers beats Ohio State. The Buckeyes will walk out of New Brunswick, New Jersey, crying at the hands of the Scarlet Knights. You heard it here first, folks. Rutgers beats Ohio State this weekend.
That's definitely a take. I don't think it's a crazy take because, again, you're playing at home if you're Rutgers. I'm not buying into it, though. That's a young quarterback.
You're boring.
Again, I could see it hypothetically, just like how I could have seen Arizona making it all the way to the World Series. but I'd still say it's a little unlikely. I'm gonna put a cap on things with college football because we've talked about it, and I love college football. And if we keep talking about it, we're gonna be at 50 minutes, and we gotta spare the viewers. I'm sure they like listening to us to a certain amount of time, but 50 minutes is a bit ridiculous.
It is.
Any big trades that went down that you think are of note from the NFL trade deadline? I just want to mention Chicago Bears picking up Montez Sweat. You'd have to expect they're giving him a contract extension if they're giving up a second-round pick, high second-round pick at that. And also, why? The Falcons were going to get him. Why? Why do you have to do that? And then the Niners proceed to get Chase Young for a third. I'm a bit disappointed in my Atlanta Falcons for not picking up one of those two players, but I'm not. It isn't the absolute end of the world at the end of the day.
I don't really get it, what the Bears are doing, because, you would think you'd be selling house, which they're not, but then they also traded one of their starting corners. So explain that to me. I forgot his name. I think it's Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson, yes. You trade him, and it's like, I will say, though, Falcons did get much-needed defensive line help, so that's a massive trade. The Giants get rid of Leonard Williams. Seattle, boosted D-line. The winners of the trade deadline, honestly, might be the Vikings. And let me explain to you why. The Vikings lose Kirk Cousins last week, right? And you think that's it. They're done. There's no way they become sellers, right? They don't only sell, they double down. They boost their offensive line for a 6th-round pick. They get a quality starter in Ezra Cleveland. And then they get a QB who's played solid to an he's played all right in Josh Dobbs. And they're starting their rookie, quarterback this week. So that'll be pretty interesting. The Washington Commanders, the only reason why I think the Commanders are doing this, you got to look at ownership, right? This is the only reason why it makes sense. The owner of the Washington Commanders is also the owner of the 76ers. Trust the process, right? Completely clean house of everyone, and then just hope that something works out. I think Chase Young, come on, a third, you could have gotten a second for him. Yes, I understand he's an up-and-coming unrestricted free agent. Come on. I think the 49ers are going to be able to re-sign him, even though they're going to be in for a lot of money. And then, Kansas City, they boost their wide receiver core with Mecole Hardman. But I think their issues are with Patrick Mahomes after a poor performance from him last week. So that's my summary of the NFL trade deadline.
Yeah, I heard a big trade to note of Kevin Byard going from Tennessee to Philly for basically some chump change. Why? No offense to Terrell Edmonds.
Why? Like, I don't get that. Why are you helping the Eagles? They're stacked. They're so good now. Their defense is insane.
I think you're forgetting the A.J. Brown trade, and I think there's some collusion going on between the Titans and the Eagles, but that's just a theory. I'm very sorry because I don't like correcting people, especially on our podcast, but Urza Cleveland was actually traded from the Vikings to the Jaguars, so they did not bolster their offensive line there. I'm very sorry for calling you out, but they did trade for Josh Dobbs, which I do think is underrated as a whole, so I will still try to prop you up a little bit. Another thing, too, is unfortunately Theodore isn't here to talk about Alabama and talking about the Giants, but the Giants made a selling move, trading Leonard Williams to the Seattle Seahawks for a 2nd and 5th round pick. I thought it was a good return for the Giants. Again, we have talked about this ad nauseum, where players that are very solid only get traded for 2nd, 3rd, 4th round picks. Like, you would think the players would get more than that, but they just don't. Like, especially NBA, like, you can see a bench player get traded for like 4 first-round picks that are pick swaps, etc., and too confusing for me to break down and explain. NHL, normally you see middle 6 forwards, even bottom 6 forwards, and bottom pair defensemen get traded for first-round picks, potentially, depending on how good they are and what kind of role they can play on a team. NFL is always interesting because, again, you see a guy like Kevin Byard get traded for a 5th, a 6th, and Terrell Edmonds. And no offense to Terrell Edmonds, but you're not Kevin Byard. You're not that guy, pal. So seeing some of these trades was definitely been just another reminder of how little and how valuable draft picks are. I think the NFL, out of all the major sports leagues, I think they value their draft picks the most.
I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, we've seen like in recent times, like players come from like very late rounds and do very well. I think that's credit to how college football programs around the country have been just getting so much better. Training at young age has become much better. Like Brock Purdy, right? Starting QB for the 49ers. Like, he was Mr. Irrelevant at the end of the day, right? So every pick matters. So I was wrong. I need to pick a new winner, of course, of the trade deadline. That's going to have to go to the 49ers. You just look lethal right now with Chase Young and Nick Bosa. That's scary if I'm a quarterback. Raffi, who's your winner of the trade deadline?
Yeah, it's hard not to go with the San Francisco 49ers. I think it's really hard to pick a winner just because I don't think much happened this year. Like most years, I'm waiting for the NFL trade deadline to get really crazy. Like we saw a couple years ago with Von Miller getting traded. That was pretty crazy. I got to say the Eagles just picking up Kevin Byard, I think is a big move. And also just because the Niners have lost their last 3 straight, I'm a bit concerned about their team right now. I'm hoping they get back on track in the coming weeks to get back to that caliber that we're expecting them to. Are they a team that should be panicking right now? That's something we can discuss on the next podcast. But time will tell if some of these trades pay off. Obviously, we've seen some of these trades lead to Super Bowl championships. The OBJ trade to LA was one of those trades that really helped the Rams get over the hump, along with the Von Miller trade. So we'll see if any of these trades come back to really help some of these teams win a championship. That'll do it for this edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to keep following us on TikTok, Benchwarmer_sports, as much as I don't like TikTok, but the boys are still grinding on that, I presume. Check out our YouTube as well. I'm getting up some new segments as well, some more hockey videos in the coming weeks. So definitely want to stay tuned for that. Hop on the ride. We're still chugging along. So for Davian, for Theodore, Carlos, I'm Raffi. We hope you enjoyed. Let us know who your winners and losers are from the NFL trade deadline. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, tell all your friends, and have a great rest of your day. See ya.
Peace.